Pinochet's leadership. Before we begin, let me briefly review the rules of the debate. Each team will have 5 minutes for the initial presentation, and after that each question, each member will have 60 seconds to prepare their answers, and we will give you 30 seconds to notice before the end of your time. Team in favor, you can speak.
Thank you. First, we're going to start with a short bio about Pinochet. Augusto Pinochet Ugarte was a Chilean general and politician who ruled Chile from 1973 to 1990. He was the leader of military junta that overthrew the socialist government of the President Salvador Allende of Chile in 1973. Pinochet was appointed army commander in chief by President Allende 18 days before the coup, which he planned and led. After the coup, Pinochet became a head of the victorious junta's governing council. And he moved to crush Chile's liberal opposition. In June 1974, Pinochet assumed sole power as a president, relegating the rest of the junta to an advisory role. During his dictatorial reign, tens of thousands of opponents of his regime were tortured, executed, and or disappeared. About this, we can say he made some free market policies in the country's economies. His junta was really condemned for this harsh suppression of dissent, although reserval of the Allende government. As a result, in a lower rate of inflation and economic boom between 1976 and 1979, a modest political liberation began in 1978 after the regime drafted a new constitution. Pinochet was never tried to try for alleged human rights abuses, but he was arrested in London in 1998 following a request from Spain for his extradition to stand a trial for crimes of genocide and terrorism. The arrest caused a tension between the UK and Chile. So this is a brief bio of Pinochet, and we're gonna point out some of uh, his details in his leadership in this period. Thanks.
Thank you, team in favor. You have 2 minutes. Would you like to use it, or would you prefer to keep it after debate? Ready?
To add, as a supporters of Augusto Pinochet, we maintain that his leadership was effective in promoting Chile's economic development and political stability. Why? Because the first reason was Chile experienced significant economic growth during the Pinochet administrations. The country GDP per capita doubled, inflation was halved, and unemployment remained low. For the second point, Chile remained peaceful and stable during the Pinochet government. The country did not face internal conflicts or civil wars. Also, poverty in Chile was significantly reduced during the Pinochet government. The extreme poverty rate was reduced by a half. We firmly believe that the actions taken were in favor of a macroeconomic growth and with sustained vision of an integral development of the Chilean economy and their welfare, which we can observe now and admire that Chile is a country with challenges, but prosperous in terms of quality of life and development, legacy of a plan that saved the vision of Pinochet and which we can observe today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, team in favor. Team in contrast, you can continue. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all present. Today we confront the legacy of Augusto Pinochet, a figure whose leadership has stirred both admiration and condemnation. Born in 1915, Pinochet's early military career paved the way for a trajectory that would ultimately reshape Chile's history. However, it is crucial to dissect not just the narrative of economic stability often attributed to his regime, but also to the darker chapters that stain his legacy. In 1873, Pinochet seized power through a military coup, ousting a democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. This marked the beginning of a 17-year dictatorship characterized by authoritarian rule, the suppression of political dissent, and grave human rights abuses. Pinochet's regime, while credited with implementing economic reforms, cannot be divorced from the brutality it influenced in those who oppose it. As we delve into this debate, let us critically examine the dichotomy between the economic stability touted by some of the undeniable human cost paid by countless Chileans during Pinochet's rule. It is imperative that we look beyond a simplistic evaluation of his leadership, considering the profound impact on democracy, human rights, and the socio-economical fabric of Chile. Our team contends that Pinochet's legacy is one marked by ethical, democratic, and social shortcomings that challenge any assertion of his merit as a good leader. Join us as we navigate through the complexities of Pinochet's biography and dictatorship to build a comprehensive understanding of the consequences endured by people of Chile under his rule.
From the beginning, the Pinochet regime was characterized by authoritarian measures that limited the fundamental freedoms and rights of the population. Just to mention some of his actions within the regime, like suppression of democratic institutions, the closure of parliament by decree, and the imposition of a state of siege and curfew, were decisions that eliminated the democratic basis of the country, depriving citizens of their rights. The prohibition of social demonstrations and union activities, together with the intervention in the university and the forced exile of thousands of Chileans demonstrated a repressive policy that attacked freedom of expression and diversity of opinions, human rights violations, and systematic repression, murder of peasants and union leaders, and also the corruption of the electoral manipulations, among others.
Thank you again. You still have 2 minutes. Would you like to continue or?
Yes, we spent the remaining time on the debate.
Thank you, both teams, for your presentation. Now we will begin to the question round. The first question, how would you describe Pinochet's leadership style during his rule? Both teams have 1 minute to prepare the answer.
Well, as we mentioned before, Pinochet came to the power in Chile through a military coup in 1973, overthrowing the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. And we believe that, and we know that his regime was characterized by but centralized and authoritarian form of governance. So we think that in some aspects, Pinochet would be described as authoritarian, and also is characterized by his abuse of power during his government.
Augusto Pinochet's leadership style during his rule can be viewed thoroughly from certain perspective. Well, Pinochet was disciplined military officer who has appointed in army commander in chief by President Allende, right? So led the military junta that overthrew the socialist government. We can say that he was determined to exterminate the leftisms in Chile. and reserved free market policies in the country's economy, which result in a lower rate of inflation and economic boom. So that was the kind of leadership that took in his rule. One of the arguments that we want to clarify.
Natalia, you have more.
Okay, he exhibited an authoritarian and militaristic leadership style. His regime was characterized by the centralization of the power, the suppression of democracy, and the application of liberal economic policies under the influence of Chicago boys. Pinochet maintained absolute control for nearly 17 years, shutting down parliament, banning political parties, and repressing the opposition. His leadership was associated with human rights violations, authoritarian nationalism, and the uncompromising resistance to any form of political opposition, leaving a controversial legacy in Chilean history.
Mauricio, you have
With what my partner said, I would like to ask to the other team, how do you justify the use of torture and the forced disappearance of people during the Pinochet dictatorship? Is that a characteristic of leadership?
Rosalind, you can.
Yes, just to compliment my classmate here, I would like to mention some of the human rights abuses that happened in Pinochet's when he was a president. We can mention torture and ill treatment. This happened to thousands of people who were detained and tortured in secret detention centers. We also have extrajudicial killings. We have political repression, forced disappearances, sexual violence, etc. So that's why we're asking the other team to justify how can they say that this was a good leadership.
Gabi, you have more.
Okay, so my classmates are mentioning something interesting about how his government basically committed all these things. We're not gonna deny that as a proof in favor. But there's also to mention some things that were positive during his government, such as major economic relief. He took charge of a country with its economy disintegrated and virtually bankrupt since its assets were not enough to cover the debts that the country was going through. Not to mention that during Allende government, they were basically going through a really, really, really bad time where the economy was basically just going every time lower and lower and lower. So I would also like my classmates mentioned like the bad things Pinochet did. That, as I said before, I'm not gonna deny that. I also want to say the four aspects that were fundamental on Pinochet's policy. That were first one, economic opening. Second, tax regulation. Third, autonomy of the central bank. And third, privatization of services such as water, electricity, something not very popular today in Chile, by the way. I don't think it's easy economically and socially to stabilize basically like a country that was used to all these accommodations. But this implementation of the reforms were enormous. They had like a big importance in what they contributed to achieving the productivity of the country, and this basically sustained economic expansion in long term.
We would like to present the resource number 1, please. Okay, just for context, the person that is going to show in the screen She is Vina Marina. She was arrested in 1975 when she was 4 months pregnant with her second baby. Before her arrest, she studied history at the University of Chile. She represented the career. She was elected by an assembly of students, but this became a reason for persecution. All the leaders were considered dangerous. Even posters were put up in the university that they were wanted as it was the same as they wanted to be dead or alive. So this is just one video of one of the thousands of people who suffered by under Pinochet's regime. So please.
Hacer algo de justicia. Ya hablaremos de qué tanta justicia se logra dar con los responsables y de cierta forma se logra.
Justamente aquí para efecto de detenerme a mí, esto es una práctica permanente, esto es una cosa que me pasó a mí solamente, ¿ya? Para efecto de detenerme a mí, se secuestró primero a mi madre, que a la sazón tenía 50 años. Se secuestró junto a ella a mi hija Eva, que tenía año y medio, ¿ya? Y se fue secuestrando a las madres y a los hijos de cada uno para efectos de lograr que nosotros nos entregáramos, ¿ya? Luego, una vez detenidos, la amenaza permanente de que te voy a traer los dedos de tu hija, que te voy a traer el pelo de tu madre, eso es parte de lo que la institución que crecí amando y respetando se permitió el lujo de hacer conmigo y con todas las personas que pasaron por la Academia de Guerra Naval y por el cuartel Silva Palma en ese periodo de la historia. El cuartel funcionó durante todo ese tiempo. Esa causa...
The argument that they told her was one less terrorist. So now we asked the next question. How do you justify the economic stability achieved during the Pinochet regime in comparison with the serious violation of the law?
As we know, during Pinochet's government, there was a democratic, peaceful, and stable transition to the new government in Chile. Taking our country as an example, we are all aware how complex and significant the consequences can be when democracy is not respected by the people. So I would like to ask the other party, how do you believe it contribute the long-term stability, and how would you compare it to other countries in the region that experience similar situations?
And a second question. I want to ask a question on the left side of the room. Would the Communist Party have treated its political opponent differently? Only that. Thank you.
Answering to my classmate question, as I said before, we're not here to say that maybe the government of Pinochet was right about doing these things, but what we're discussing now is that he was a leader, and in fact he was a leader. Also, analyst says that perhaps it wasn't the correct way to do this. This gave better results on different sectors of the economy, and also gave positive things to all the people that was struggling during the times in the economy. I would also like to mention something interesting. If you remember the words of the socialist Carlos Altamirano, that was basically he was so he was like the wingman of Pinochet, and he said something really polemic at the time. He said 1 million deaths in Chile to implement the socialism was a low price. So I want to ask the team that's against, what do they think about that?
Team against, would you like to have 1 minute to prepare your answers? Okay, you have one.
¿Estás grabando aquí? O sea, todo. ¿O solo lo que hablan ellos?
Más o más. O sea, a ratos me pasa lo que hablan ellos. Pero se supone que solo hay que grabar lo que hablan ellos, ¿no?
Ajá. Y yo lo que hablan ellos.
No, eso no nos complicará la hora de editar.
Tal vez, por eso empezamos a grabar.
Tal vez, sí.
Sí, ¿no? Ya.
Would you like to answer? Adriana.
Well, answering the first questions made by the team against, well, we consider that all the economic repercussions does not justify all the human rights violations that were made during the government of Pinochet. But also we want to mention that these neoliberal forms that were implemented also brought economic inequality and social disparities. So we want to make emphasis on these arguments, and I want to ask to the team against if you consider that all these points made now contribute to a good economic development in country in the last years.
Comment about talking about the economic aspect of his presidency, I'd like to mention that there was also a negative side on this. It also had negative effects, such as the increase of inequality, the increase of unemployment, and the increase of environmental damage. And this is all I'm saying this with a source that is the Chilean Economy Under Pinochet by Paul W. Hain, written in 1982. In this book, the author challenges the notion that Pinochet's policies were necessary for economic growth. So I think that's important to consider for this debate.
Just to complement, yes, there were economic improvements in the country, but it also is important to mention that the employment rate reached 20%. Then there was also a reduction of worker salaries. There was the gap between the rich and the poor were widened due to privatization, and also that small and medium companies that created products for the domestic market went to bankrupt. There was just only one way to carry out the idea with authoritarianism.
Thank you. Answering the question that Freddie made, we didn't quite understand it, but we think that if he was referring to how communist parties came to power, I would like to say that we gotta remember that Pinochet put the country in chaos for days, bombing the presidential palace and assassinating different political leaders in his way to the power. So we don't quite understand what his point was.
Okay, we are moving on to the second question, which is, did Pinochet's leadership style characterized by human rights abuses? have a lasting impact on Chile's political and social landscape even after his rule? Both teams have 1 minute to prepare your question.
While you think about your answers, just a friendly reminder to please raise up your tone, speak a little bit louder so the microphones can pick up your voice. And another recommendation, you are not required to answer every question that is thrown at you. So you can, of course, if you want, if you would like to, but you are not required to. So if you would like to answer, you may ask for a minute in order to think, or you can simply just refuse to answer it. Except these questions you actually have to answer, of course.
Pegarle un poquito de zoom, pero ojalá tanto las sillas. No se puede por estar así, porque voy a poner un poco. No, está bien que apoyes, pero trata de jugar y subirle un poco el ángulo. Cuando habla ya le subo yo. Aquí está hablando.
O sea, está bueno que la ves, porque también para que no salga gente. Si ya después, o sea, inclinar un poquito más.
Your time is over, so please in favor you, David,
Okay, to answer the question, I would like to point some things. The first is that when Boric, that's the new president of Chile, tried to change the reforms of the government that were installed by Pinochet, basically Chile had a really like a big complot because they were maybe used to it. So I think the what Pinochet implied is still living. I mean, it's the legacy he left for Chile. That's one of the main reasons why Chile had one of the most stabilized economies in the whole in South America. Also, I would like to mention, according to a survey conducted by Mori Chile 2023, approximately 36% of the population in Chile has a favorable view of the dictatorship, Augusto Pinochet. The positive opinion of this regime has been growing steadily over the last 10 years. So I would like to note that. Also, the surveys and results and the actual numbers may vary, but it's what we have in for this year.
Answer the question. We, as Team Against, think that the Pinochet dictatorship style remained after their regime. So, because the acts that he made within this period were so were planned to maintain. For example, the constitution imposed by Pinochet in 1980, which granted tutelary powers to the armed forces, was maintained. It was reformed much later, until 2005. Also, the democracy after his regime was strongly influenced by the military, maintaining some appointed senators and other prerogatives. Also, we have to mention that socially, culture and art were completely repressed. There were a strong censorship and persecution of artists, intellectuals, and works that were critical of the regime or considered leftist. Also, this repression of the culture and the art didn't stop until 1990, when there was an explosion of the libertarian culture.
Well, to complement what my partner says, I want to ask to put the resource number 3, please. Mhm. Well, we can see this is an article of El País that was published in 2011 and mentions that more than 40,000 victims of the dictatorship were recognized by Chile's government. And well, this article also mentions that the public commission that receive and investigate new allegations of human rights violation committed by the state agents during the dictatorship of General Augusto Pinochet delivered a 60-page report to President Sebastián Piñera that included another 9,800 victims and 30 cases of missing or excluded persons, in addition to those that had already been previously classified. So this clearly shows some of the repercussions that still are shown in the recent years of Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. Yeah, that's the answer of Team Against.
Yes, please. So, um, while acknowledging the gravity of the human rights abuses during Pinochet's rule, it's a little bit illusory not to accept all the acts against human rights carried out. But let's see, on the other hand, the points in which he helped the country and made him a leader. One of the most important points is the economic progress of Chile, uh, because Pinochet economic policies brought about significant growth and stability. Chile's economy was restructured, leading to reduced inflation and increased foreign investment. The foundation laid the groundwork for Chile's economy success later years and still now. The second point is preventing the communism. His regime was seen as a counterbalance to the spread of communism in South America during the Cold War. These stance might have prevented Chile from falling into the sphere of influence of leftist ideologies prevalent in neighboring countries. So, my question is, if a person like Pinochet, a really good leader in economic stuff, need to do a really bad thing in the path, is it really bad in the later years? Because he made a change, and not only in the country. I think he made a change in the ideology in a lot of adjacent countries in South America. So I think it's worth.
Look at the image. I want you to remember all the damage that was done by the followers of the people of Allende. That is the legacy he has left, a radical left with no respect for other and doing violence to achieve their goal in a democracy that their generations dreamed of, to see a country burning for only for privileges and favoritism. That is what Pinochet has stopped in his years of government and still keeps them at least in a constitution worthy of the magnificent development that has been achieved, with challenges, but with a free market and individual freedoms. Thank you.
Okay, we will continue with the third question. How did Pinochet's administration influence tourism internationally? Was it beneficial or detrimental to the country's situation? You have 1 minute to prepare your answers.
Well, as a team, we mentioned that Pinochet's regime faced international condemnation for its human rights abuses. The global community expressed concern over the violation of basic human rights principles, tarnishing Chile's reputation on the world stage. As we mentioned before, his actions were noticed by a lot of countries in the world and were condemned by these countries.
Okay, so Forbes once said something interesting, and it was that Chile was named as the little Switzerland because of all the economic rise this country had over the years Pinochet was in the government. So, as I said before, we're not going to deny all the abuses that were committed, but we're not also going to deny the fact that a single person was able to raise the whole economy of a country that was going through harsh moments during those times. And until these years, you can see that a lot of countries, such as Bolivia, such as Argentina, and Venezuela, that's the worst case we have of a country with the worst economy in the worst scenario possible, basically needed what Pinochet did for Chile. Because that's the result that basically he had. Thank you.
So talking about how was the image of Chile and complimenting my classmate, she said, due to the human rights abuses, they were an isolated country. They were condemned by the United Nations and other international organizations. And this, the president and the government tried to had a better image, but they were unsuccessful. For example, they attempt to portray Chile as a model of economic stability and social order, and it sought to cultivate ties with certain right-wing governments and organizations. But as I said, these efforts were truly unsuccessful.
Oscar, you may have the word.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start by a quote, and it's Chile is what it is, chose by Pinochet. So, under Pinochet administration, Chile's positive image was influenced in a few key ways, only in three key ways: the economic transformation, the infrastructure development, and the foreign relations and stability. These three aspects contribute positively to Chile's international image during Pinochet administration. And this impact in all Latin America countries, in all Latin America's development and helping the international commerce. So I think the Pinochet administration influenced Chile's image in a really good way, and I think was really beneficial not only for Chile, so also for all South America's countries. Thank you.
Okay, I would like to compliment what my partner said. Just a reminder, Pinochet's regime was condemned by the United Nations General Assembly and other international organizations. Also, Chile was suspended from the Organization of American States and the Inter-American Development Bank, and many countries, including the United States, imposed economic sanctions for Chile.
Yeah, I would also like to say something. In 1999, Alejandro Foxley, who was the finance minister, said in his interview, "We may not like the government that came before us, but what they did many things right. We have inherited an economy that basically changed and took us to a better place." Thank you.
Well, in this case, I want to refute some of the arguments that were mentioned by Oscar. In this case, well, as mentioned, the reputation of Pinochet's dictatorship during 1973. We have to consider that, of course, the human rights abuses and the lack of democratic governance led to Chile's isolation on the diplomatic front. Many countries and international organizations distanced themselves from Pinochet's regime, contributing to a period of international isolation for Chile. So this clearly shows the bad reputation that Chile had during this time.
Okay, Chile's image international was benefited by the policies of economic Pinochet. One of their policies are economic opening, privatization, deregulation, macroeconomic stability, focus on the financial sector. These really benefit Chile because these are things that the Chile can provide better stability and reduce the poverty of it. This obviously save a lot of lives, and not only because the policies, but the way that they implement neoliberal policies.
And if we don't have more information, we are going to move on to the next one. Gabby, you have it.
Yes, so the team that games are talking about all the things that we did, but I would like to point out the fact that at the end it was also stripping people of their basic rights, such as militarizing the political process with human arms in the mirror. That mirror was basically a group that was leaded with the ideology of Stanley and also Marxist. And we need to remember that they were also like a big group of people
Okay. Um, so he took charge of a country where the economy was visibly really damaged, and opting for the implementation of a free market model and the adaptation of a program was based on four aspects. First one, the economic opening. Second, tax regulation. Third one, autonomy of the central bank. And the fourth one, the privatization of services such as water and electricity.
A very important aspect that was characterized of Pinochet administration was the control over institutions. Pinochet and his military junta exercised strict control over various institutions, including media, judiciary, and educational institutions. This control was instrumental, as we can say, to maintain some stability, but this led to a limited political freedoms and also fostered to an environment for fear and censorship.
Also, I would like to mention that privatizations allow, among other things, the creation of new jobs and allow Chilean consumers to access better quality goods and products at lower prices thanks to exceeding competition. Not everything during the military government was negative. What happened is that Pinochet's impulsiveness and strength stood out more due to the difficult times that were being experienced during the time before they came with an unbalanced economy.
Okay, so I would like to mention that this political stability could be due to all the corruption that existed in all the elections under Augusto Pinochet's regime, because they were characterized by a lack of fairness and transparency, and they were widely seen as a sham. Pinochet used his power to manipulate the electoral process and to ensure that his candidates won. So that's something that could be really important when talking about the political stability that was part of Pinochet's administration.
Just to complement, it is said that the 75% of the people supported the regime, but these votes were counted without electoral records. So political instability during Pinochet's government was marked by repression and lack of democratic participation.
No team against.
Okay. Well, as a theme, we conclude that specifically the leadership of Augusto Pinochet was characterized by he was authoritarian. His government was characterized by human rights violations. His regime is marked by severe human rights violations, including torture, forced disappearance, and executions of political opponents. Also, is characterized of suppression of political dissent, the lack of democracy legitimacy, some economic inequality and social disparities that are very clear nowadays. A legacy of fear and trauma. Pinochet's authoritarian rule left a lasting legacy of fear and trauma among the Chilean people. The violation of a rule law because he didn't respect all the established institutions in Chile. And of course, it was also characterized by international condemnation. As we mentioned before, it was isolated and condemned by some countries. That's why, considering all these previous points mentioned, we consider that the leadership of Augusto Pinochet was not good and was not and did not have good things to leave to Chilean people.
Okay, we believe that no one can deny or justify, as the team against said, all the crimes that Pinochet committed during his government. However, we believe that a true leader does, and he actually does it, what is necessary for his country to grow. Just as we cannot deny the crimes that Pinochet committed, we cannot deny also that Chile has been one of the greatest powers, not only in Latin America, but in the world. And the ideology that Pinochet imposed is still in force among Chileans. So much so that as we said before, Chile recently rejected the new leftist constitution. So, with this rejection of Chileans of the constitution, we can say that the ideology of the rights of Pinochet is still in force among Chileans and is still in the mind of Chileans. Most of Chileans doesn't remember all the crimes or the victimizations, all the victims, but they remember and they live in a country that Chileans can say that is a good economy and a good country to live. It may be not the way that Pinochet imposed leadership was not the most ideal leadership to impose, but a leadership has to achieve his goal, and the goal of Pinochet was achieved, that to make Chile a better country.
So thank you for participating in the debate number 9. We can end the debate with applause for your participation.